Thank you all for attending our Keystroke Live on Wednesday, and the backup options is what we're going to go over today, and different ideas on how to back up your keystroke data. And as I just mentioned a second ago or two, we're going to be doing this on Thursdays next time around instead of on Tuesdays. Thursdays instead of Wednesdays. And today we're going to go over the keystroke backup options. We're going to talk about the keystroke quick archive and the settings for that for 32-bit and 64-bit computers. We're going to talk about automating the backups using some keystroke programs like KS Backup. And we're going to talk about other backup programs that are very common on the market now, everything from Carbonite, Mozy Pro, Acronis, Nova Backup, and other things like Windows Backup. And we're going to talk about the need for real-time backup and how that could actually decrement performance and so forth in Keystroke. So let me go ahead and open up Keystroke, and we're going to talk about the Keystroke options quickly. These are have been around for quite some time. So I'll go ahead and clerk in here. I'm just using some sample data in our tutor folder. We do this through Configuration Manager, and I'm going to double click on Configuration to show you the menus here. Before we do, let me show you first, before I show you the settings, I'm going to show you the different backup options we have. Keystroke has always had a standard backup. We now call that the old standard. Our new standard backup is compatible with 64-bit computers. It uses a 7-zip program instead of PKZip. The custom has always been around. This is for you to run a command line. You can actually set it up to run a batch file at your will that you might have set up to back up things from Keystroke on a server to, let's say, an external hard drive or so forth. You can use anything from a xcopy command to our program called KS Backup. I'll show you that in a little bit. Or you can use anything under the custom that you've come up with. There might be a command line you can run from different offline backup software. Quick archives, we've kind of added this on the last version 7 stuff, and the quick archives will actually go through and make what we call a quick archive. It uses 7-zip or uses PKZip, but most common is 7-zip, and it backs it up to an archives folder. To start with, I'm going to go ahead and click on the quick archives, and you'll see how fast things will happen here. This is a faster computer. It talks about this being an exclusive process. Zip-type programs use what they call CRC checking, so they want to make sure that as the file is zipped up, that its size is the same as what it believes it should have been. And if you were to do a backup and it were to take some time, files might not be backed up in a valid format, meaning you might be backing up the transaction file at the same time somebody is setting up or doing a transaction, and so you might end up losing what they call a bit or a block here and there, and you might have troubles with restoring that. So we've added this warning. This is kind of new to 7.1 about that this is an exclusive process and all people should be out of Keystroke. Our tech support might call you and say, hey, let's make a quick archive and have you email that to us. And knowing that this is for tech support purposes and not so much for a reliable, restorable backup, it's probably okay that you can back this up during business hours. But if you want a reliable backup, we're going to talk about reasons you don't want Keystroke, people in Keystroke, you don't want active sales being going on, and you don't want live automatic incremental backups happening while people are in the program. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK here. You may not have seen what happened, but it ran through a very quick archive of our small tutor sample. And as you can see by this command, it actually backed up star.star, which is all files in the tutor folder. And it gave it a name called Keystroke Archives. That's actually the folder we put our archive files in. It gave it tutor, and then it gave it this kind of incremented name here. We use this so we can do multiple backups throughout the day and still be able to see what those archives are. So I'm going to go ahead and just say OK here. I'm going to kind of shell out to my, I think I have a Keystroke folder open here. So this is my Keystroke folder, just to show you that in the Keystroke folder, I'm sorry, I think I've reversed this. Let's go to the top. So we have our, let's do that again, sorry about that. We have different directories, and this is the archives folder I'm speaking about. So if I open this up, this is going to have different folder names for your different data sets. So if you have a data folder called data, it would have created a data file folder called data. And if you had one called store 1 or store 2 or store 3, you would see the same here. I'm going to open up our tutor folder and show you that over time here, I've created multiple backups. You'll see one I did earlier today. This shows the 12 name here. That was done at 9/17. This one here was kind of a supplement to that. That was done a little later, the one I just did now. So all these backups, the good news about the Quick Archive, it does not overwrite an old backup. That's the good news. The bad news is if you do Quick Archives all the time, your archives folder can grow very large. And nowadays, hard drive real estate is very inexpensive, so I wouldn't worry about eating up that hard drive real estate. It's better to have a backup than not to have a backup. Back to the Keystroke program, giving you the pros and cons about the different backup options. Our standard backup creates a file called keyback.zip, which is overwritten and appended to every time. So if you had a version 6 data set and then used our standard backup, it would back up your version 7 data on top of version 6, and you kind of would have a mess. So we recommend the Quick Archives function. Let me show you the difference also by restoring. I'm going to go to the Restore option in Keystroke, and I'm going to say Restore from Quick Archives. And here it gives us a list of all the archives that we have in that tutor folder. Again, this is our sample data or tutor folder. We just have had some in this computer since 2010, actually. We've actually been doing Keystroke Live, and we've been talking about packing files and making backups all through this time. So our Keystroke Live computer has backups that are valid through 2010. Here's the last one I just backed up. This was designated with the letter A, which means it was backed up today, but it was actually the second backup. Here's an example that this would be a letter B. This would be the third backup of that day. So the Quick Archives has its bonus that you can, number one, back up more than just your data files. You can also back up subdirectories, and you can also back up other files than DAT files, like star.star in this example. I'm not going to go ahead and do the restore here, but I am going to jump back into the Keystroke folder and just show you the contents of the file and how you can control the contents of the file. So back to my Keystroke folder. Here we go. I think you can see this fine now. This was the last backup I had just done. So I'm going to open this folder up, or this zip file, and again, keep in mind that we're talking about different ideas for backups. The Keystroke program uses a zipping process, a compression of the files. During a compression process, there's always a possibility of data loss because the compression and the uncompression may lose some data files. So we're going to talk about, after a few minutes here, what the different options are that you can do, other kind of backups that don't include like a zipping process or compression. So as you notice, this file here has all DAT files. If you scroll through it, you'll see just DAT files. This is a standard set of Keystroke data. As you'll notice, there's only like one transaction file in here. That's this one here. This is our sample data. And you'll notice there are no subdirectories here. Let me go back a step. We've done other backups in time. I'm going to just select this one that was done here January of this year. Looks like it also has the same here. I think I have some that have other data folders. Let me click around a few times. Here's an example that we have done. Excuse me, I'll go back. on 9/21 of 11, if I open this file up, you'll see different file folders. By default, the Quick Archive will actually open up and zip up all your files in all of your subdirectories. So in this case, you have your DB screen folder, that's all your database screens. Your lists folder, that's either customizable lists or normally address or zip code lists. A logs file, that happens to be for KeyPay. A photos folder, this is for different photos you're using to attach to your inventory records. A summary folder, this allows you to do your summary data and have it all there for you. And your toolbars folder. Also notice in this file here we have some temporary files, some TMP files here. We probably have some other TMP files or some text documents here. And we're going to talk about this no back list file. This is actually how this program works. We have an XML file here with some INI files. The Quick Archives function will back up all files and all subdirectories unless you tell it to do different. So let me go back to the Keystroke folder. I'm going to go to my tutor folder, and I've created a file called noback.lst. This file, noback.lst, is a list, that's the LST part, of the files I do not want to back up when I use the Quick Archives. So you can actually control what you do and don't want to back up. Let's open this up. I'm going to have to change my sharing here of the screen so you can see this. Alrighty. So in this file, I created a simple text file using Notepad. I've decided to exclude star.tmp files. I've decided to exclude the whole summary folder /star.star files. The summary data files are pretty much files that you can generate at any time. They do take some time to generate, so you may or may not want to back them up, or you can back them up on a monthly basis and then always regenerate the last month's data if you need to. I've thrown this in as an example. When people move from version 6 to version 7, and let's say they have 200 megabytes of data, well, we put all that data into a v6 data subfolder there for kind of an archive purposes and for tech support. So on a daily basis, and if things are working well in version 7, you may or may not need to back up your star.star from the v6 data folder. If you have one big backup of that, you don't need to be backing that up on a regular time and zipping that up. You may see your archives getting bigger and bigger and bigger because you have all your version 6 data and all your version 7 data and all your summary data and all your other data that you may not want to back up. So I just threw this out as an example that you may want to exclude v6 data /star.star. We also back up toolbar files. If you use the toolbar editor, you're able to actually back up the backups of the toolbars. As you make changes to your toolbars, they create files like BA1, BA2, BA3. So in case something goes terribly wrong, you're able to go back a few files and get those. Not a bad idea to not have this in here. They're very small files. So if you want to just say, no, I want to keep all my backups of my toolbar files, just delete that from your file, save your file, and now you're going to only be excluding these files listed here. Notice I did not put in star.ini files. They're kind of important. That's where our settings are. They're almost as important as DAT files. The TMP files, the only time I can say to not exclude those, meaning include them, would be at a time where you're having a technical problem and you have to pack data files and you have to they create a backup file or a TMP file as a backup. That might be a reason not to exclude them. So kind of in summary here, I'm going to go back to Keystroke and we'll talk about, I'll just do one more backup and we'll go back to our Keystroke program here. Here's our files right now, and let's just do another backup here of if I do a quick archive. I guess I should just go through some of the settings before I jump down to quick archive, and we'll finish up the Keystroke stuff. Our standard is normally star.tmp star from your tutor folder to a backups subdirectory under Keystroke. Imagine everything on your server. You have a backups and an archives subdirectory under Keystroke. If that hard drive fails, you lose all your Keystroke and all your backups. So we'll be talking about how to back up automatically from Keystroke to another drive or directory. So this is going to create a backups subfolder underneath Keystroke. Notice the relative path. You could certainly change this. You could change this from, I'm going to back up my C drive to my, let's say, F drive, and that would work just fine. Again, this one file called keyback.zip would be a file that will be overwritten. Back in the day, that was a great way to do a backup. Nowadays, when people call in, they call and say, I lost my data, and you say, do you have a backup? They say, yeah, I just made one 2 minutes ago, which really just overwrote their good backup with the bad backup. So keep that in mind. The quick archives is the way to go, so you'll never override the bad data over a good data backup. No need to talk about the old standard. It's the same thing, but it uses pkzip. The custom, this is where I can put in some different information here. I'm going to go ahead and just change this. I'm going to say this right here could be a custom command program that you use in the batch file that you've created to send data to a different location. I'm going to go ahead and run this here. Again, it says it's an exclusive process. You probably can't see this running in the background because it's shared the windows here. It's backing up data, but I will show it to you automatically here in a second. It just made a backup of 3 different subdirectories into an external hard drive. So let me go ahead and go to a copy of this, and I'll show you what that's all about. Here's an example batch file that we're using, again, another Keystroke program, and we'll talk about external backup options in a moment. Here's a program that we use, our program called ksbackup.exe. This was an exe pretty much designed to be run externally, so you can actually go out and set up a batch file to do what you want, when you want, and put it on a scheduled task. Keep in mind you want to do this at a time where the Keystroke programs are not dynamically changing. You're not doing lots of sales or in the middle of the day. That would slow the computer down, and you might have a mixed match data set. But it would be good to back up, let's say, every evening to a different location. So here's an example, and this, by the way, is all documented in ksbackup.doc. All of our EXEs have their own doc file in your Keystroke doc folder, and I've cut and pasted this information right here from our ksbackup.doc file. Basically, in a simple process here, it actually changes directory to your Keystroke data folder. It runs in a trib command because what I would like to do is do full backups. I don't want to do incremental backups. This program can do incremental backups. I've never been a big fan of incremental backups, normally because hard drive space is very cheap and we have lots of it. I'd rather have a full set of data at any one time, not having to dig through backup A and then add backup B to it and see if backup C melds with it well. That's just me and the way I do what I do. This right here is actually going to back up. It's going to back up everything to a folder called ksback. Now, in this example, I put everything on the C drive. Probably a bad example. If I wanted to do this more robust, I would make this backup to my F drive, my K drive, or an external USB drive. But this is a simple example to say, I'm going to go ahead and run the program, and this is a relative path here. I could have put it in the hard path, but this is going to go back to the Keystroke directory and run ksbackup. It's going to make a folder. It's going to put the file in a folder called ksback.data, and this reset attributes is going to say, yes, I've backed up everything. I'm going to reset the attribute, which means to the archive bit. So if you wanted to do incremental backups, you could do this without this command up above. So this actually batch file does this about 3 different times. It's almost identical. It creates a ksback tutor folder. It does a KS back, in this case store 1. We can have a store 2. You can have different forms. You can actually add in what you want into this. And this program, ksbackup.exe, also uses the noback.lst philosophy to say, back up everything except for the files I'll exclude in the noback file. So I just ran this a second ago from Keystroke. Back to Keystroke, and we will see. I'll run it a second time here just to show you. If I go to my backup and I do my custom, it remembers that I ran C keystroke myback.bat, and I think I'll click this and see if you can see. Well, actually, yeah, let's see if I can make it happen and see if you can actually see it. There's the backup going through all the 3 different data sets, and then it's done. I'm going to switch over here to this application. Let's go back a directory. So now I'm just looking at what I have just done. In this, let me get clear on what I can see here. All right, so we have actually, let's go back a folder. On the C drive, I've created a folder called KSBack. Notice that in this folder, and this could be an external hard drive, a USB drive, or some other drive on the network, it has 3 folders, data, store 1, and tutor. If I open up the data folder, ksbackup.exe actually creates files with a date name kind of mentality. As you see, it creates a file called lastback.txt. If I show that, it's a very simple file that tells me here's the file name. This is what I did back up, the data folder. I backed it up to this file name and how many files are in it. So here, that's the last backup. But I've done a few today, as you can notice by my examples here. There's an A and a B and a C. There's always an LST, that's kind of our list file example. That shows the list of the files that are in there. And then there's the zip file. This is the last one I just had done at 10:24. And let's open it up. And it shows in this data folder we have the DB screens, the list, the summary, the toolbars, all the data files. There may or may not be some temp files in here because I might have a noback.list file. You notice there's no any files in here, INI files in here. Let's go back to KS Backup. In the Store 1 folder, I also did this 3 times today, the 3rd time showing you. Here I've got some different exclusions. I don't have a summary folder or photos folder. But I do have all my files, my DAT files. And if I go back to the KS Back in the tutor folder, here's my zip file here. It does have like the lists I did back up. I don't have any TMP files because I did exclude those. I did kind of do this earlier to make sure I'm not backing up too much information. So there's kind of an overview of what Keystroke can and can't do. Remember, I'm going to go show you here real quickly. Anytime in your Keystroke folder, you have a doc folder. In this doc folder, if you've never explored this, this shows you all the different doc files for almost every one of our EXEs. I can find doc files on everything from Keystroke to Deltrans to DB names to DolU. We also have one for KS Backup. If I open up this document, and I'll have to switch tasks here. Where is my document? There it is. This right here is our document called ksbackup.doc. So this kind of shows you in a text format of what the program does. It shows different command lines. You can actually use it to use the old pkzip if you wanted to. You can put a password on the backups if you'd like to. But down at the bottom is what's good to read is that you can actually, here's an example of how to set it up in the batch file. So if you say, I can't remember that, you can always look this up here. Here's an example here where we don't want to back up these files. This is the noback.lst file and so forth. And we talk about just the KS backup uses the zip from info-zip, that's the 7-zip file, and pkzip. And if you ever need to know more information on all the command lines to do your own kind of stuff, we also have that too in the Keystroke folder. So very shortly here, I'm going to like to talk about external processes and maybe open this up for sharing during this meeting. But let me just give you some points of reference before I do that. We've found out over time, and I've spoken with Michael Gebb, our president, about the using things like other backup programs. There's some great programs out there. There's Carbonite, there's Mosey Pro, there's Acronis, Nova Backup, and Nova Store, and other backup programs. A lot of them and a lot of the hard drives you might buy nowadays actually are USB drives that come with their own software. You plug them in, they install the software, and immediately they're backing up everything all the time. We found out some, when people have some significant performance issues, besides the known issue with the Microsoft opportunistic locking issue, that we find out when you open up and start looking at what programs are running, they may have 2, 3, or 4 different backup programs running all the time simultaneously. I've remoted into more than half a dozen in this last month, and they have everything from Dell Data Store, Carbonite, Acronis backup engine, and an Intel storage drive mirroring program all running at the same time. And I ask them, well, tell me about your backup strategy, and they go, well, I don't know, it gets backed up every night. And number one, they don't know. Number two, they don't know where it goes. And number three, they don't know how to recover if they needed to. You can't really back up Keystroke in a real-time environment unless you're using some kind of RAID operating system that has a mirrored drive on a secondary external drive. Keystroke needs to be backed up. All data must be backed up as a set of data. Imagine if you back up your inventory, you just get done backing it up, now start backing up 200 transaction files. By the time you get up to number 200, they've done 15 transactions. Now your inventory quantity on hands don't really jive with your transactions, the actual sales that you've done. Same thing with customers. As I back up my customers, now I'm doing 200 transaction files. They're being real-time backed up all the time. By the time you get to the last file, the customer's amount balance might have changed, but your backup of the customer doesn't jive with that. So we've spoken about this. We don't really recommend the real-time, all-the-time backup option. There can be times throughout the day, 3 times a day we do it here. We just back up from one machine to another. We use like an Xcopy command, and we take that risk of having an unsynchronized backup. More often than not, you'll open up something like Carbonite, you'll see like 15 files pending, and it's backing up the inventory file, the 80 megabyte file, every 4 seconds, and everyone wonders why it's a big lag between doing transactions or pulling up line items. And it turns out because, well, that 80 megabyte file has to be copied to Carbonite, up to the internet, back down, and confirm that it's done, and everyone's waiting and waiting. So we're in a learning curve right now about how these live real-time backups work and internet backups work. RAID has been around for a long time. I'm not an expert on that, but I do believe that it's kind of a stable process. This internet backup to the cloud, it's been out there for a very short period of time. We're kind of learning as we go to find out what really is happening, so keep that in mind. At this time, I'd like to unmute all the microphones, and if anyone has any questions or comments or something I didn't cover, now would be a great time to ask, and I appreciate your time joining us today. So the microphones are open. Does anyone have any questions for me? No, we got a nice quiet crowd. Either I didn't unmute all the lines, or I got your shell shocked.
So, Mike.
Hi.
Howdy, Gordon.
Hi.
The backup, I noticed when you set the parameters, it just does backup everything. But if you have the no back file, then obviously you're not going to back up everything. Maybe one would like to know that actually there is a no back file. I suppose you just have to go look every time if you weren't the author, or if you have a power user or someone that thinks they know what's going on and they go and put one in on you while you're away.
Yes.
But there's nothing on the actual launching of the backup that says that there is a no back list file out there that it might preclude you from backing up everything like you thought you were going to do.
That's a good question, Gordon.
True?
No, there's no prompting that says these files will be excluded. And so, yeah, you could have a power user that's put some things in place that might not be preferred. If you have your backup batch file, and if you were concerned and if hard drive space was relatively cheap and you didn't mind backing up everything, you could throw a command line in there to delete that file or rename noback.lst to noback.dat, run your backup, then rename it back. You're right, though. There is no warning, there is no clue, and the only clue is that list of files that we create, the date.lst is the list of what got backed up. You'd look in that and go, that's funny, I don't see the file I wanted to see in there. It's missing. So things like TMP files, I threw that into this example because people do packing and stuff like that, but sometimes the TMP files are as valuable, if not more valuable, than the existing DAT file when they call you a dealer. So I might not recommend using that, like exclude the .tmp files. And so that's a very good question. I think, and by the way, there's other methods. You can use an xcopy command where you can control what files get copied. So when the power user does it their way with their quick archives, you might have your own way that they don't even know about that backs up everything to some other place. But that's a good question.
Yeah, we often use USB thumb drive, but the problem with that is that if you don't have anyone consistently changing it, you're sitting on a computer and you don't have great disaster recovery either.
Right. So there's these big 1 terabyte USB external drives are better than the little pocket jump drives, where there you could use the KSBackup.exe program and back it up to a folder, and that folder would have, every time they backed it up, every backup they've ever done until you run out of disk space. And I kind of use my machine. I use one of those. I use a program called NovaStore, and it creates a backup of my entire computer because there's some important stuff on my computer with the setup files I do. And I have like 5 or 6 or 8 different backups, so I have 8 weeks of different backups I can go back to in case of a total catastrophic problem happen with my computer, as if mine were a server, which mine's not the server, but I have some important stuff I need on there. So there's some great ideas out there, and you want to make sure, number one, you're backing things up. Number two, take the time, which is hard to do, to make sure your backup's valid. Copy it off somewhere, put it on another machine, and restore it and make sure it's valid. Any other questions today? Well, thank you all for listening in to me, and like I said, there's some good stuff down the road with this backing up to the cloud. I just don't know if the real-time, all-the-time backup works, but a daily backup would be a great thing to have. Just want to thank you again, and remember, next week, after the holiday, there will not be a Wednesday meeting after Christmas, and there will not be one after the 1st. And then I believe you'll get an email talking about possibly changing the Keystroke POS Live to a Thursday. So put that on your calendar, probably the second Thursday, not the first Thursday in January. But thank you for your time. Any last questions?
Just one.
Yeah.
I noticed the last two backups you had, it said V715. Is that a release that I missed, or is what build is that?
You're very sharp, Gordon. No, that's what we're testing now. That's going to be our next release. That has things like the multi-store purchase orders for people that have Keystroke Advanced and the multi-store module. They get to do they allocated. Michael Gebb may have displayed that or shown that 2 weeks ago. It also has some new stuff in there about being able to email right from print buttons. You don't need to send mail anymore. We have a new program called Keymail.exe. The setup's very simple. It uses TCP/IP, very similar to KeyPay. It works with Microsoft Outlook, Gmail, Windows Live, Yahoo. We've tested almost all of them. Yahoo, Hotmail. So whatever account you have, for people that have the advanced POS, they get to just send emails via print buttons. So it's very simple to use and to set up. And I may have misspoke. I'm not sure right now if that's an advanced only feature or if that'll be included with everybody. I think it might be with everybody. But you picked up on that. That'll be the next version, 7.15. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks. Everyone have a great day. And happy holidays to everyone.